Good evening. I think we've probably all had one of those moments, probably quite a few times when we're out driving, where we're coming up onto a street corner or onto a street light, ready to make a turn, a right turn or a left turn, and we see a homeless person holding a sign. And it creates a large number of different emotions. We're trying to think, well, we could give some money and that make us feel good, and this is obviously somebody who really is down on their luck. On the flip side, we're also thinking, well, we're not quite sure how those dollars would really be used, and maybe that isn't the best approach, or maybe that's not the best thing to do. And so a lot of times what we end up doing is that we originally kind of hope that we can go right through the traffic light, right through the green light, not have to interact whatsoever. But when you're there, you're kind of looking at someone, or you say something, you not say anything, and then you just go ahead and make that turn. Usually within a couple seconds or within a couple minutes, you go ahead and move on and stop thinking about the issue of homelessness or that homeless individual altogether. And really what I want to talk to you today is not just about the broader issue of homelessness, but also really what does it take to literally end homelessness. And along those lines, I think we really first of all need to think about homelessness not as any one demographic or one specific unique kind of individual. Homelessness is really a spectrum, a continuum of need and circumstances which relate to those who are just intermittently homeless because of a job loss, a breakup in the family. Maybe someone has had a health problem and they haven't been able to pay for that, and just intermittently at a period of where they no longer have the capacity to pay their mortgage or pay their rent, and then pretty quickly they're able to put those necessary pieces in order and move out of homelessness. A lot of times doubled up in a couch surfing situation, episodically homeless or hidden homeless, and that represents the majority of our homeless population. On the flip side, though, we also have the chronically homeless, those who many of us believe, when we think of the homeless population, this is who we envision. Someone who's got maybe smelling of alcohol, looking like they're dealing with some mental health issues. Someone looks like they've been having a hard time with hygiene over the last while. And that form of homelessness certainly does exist. It is a minority, but it's certainly the most visible. It is the most vulnerable, and it is the most expensive form of homelessness that does exist. And I think it's really about how do we address that broader continuum. But I think when we really start looking at what does it take and what does it require of us as a community in order to really not just manage the issue of homelessness, not just provide immediate need after immediate need, but what does it really take to transform, to turn the dial in a way that really actually starts to dramatically reduce the issue of homelessness in a community. And I think what we have found is that there's multiple reasons behind wanting to think about this. And I think the first and foremost is certainly that's in the best interest of our most vulnerable citizens. Those who are homeless, those whose life expectancy while out on the street is going to be 25 to 30 years less than the general population. So there's deep social implications for going ahead and really starting to reduce homelessness. But then on the flip side, there's also this component that I think a lot of people don't necessarily think about right out of the gate, and that is that there is strong economic reasons for ending homelessness. What we found is that when people are out in a state of homelessness, they're disproportionately using our police department, our ambulance, our fire department, our jail system. A lot of times, as I said, this is a population that's living significantly less than the rest of us by and large, and are dealing consequently with much higher rates of health issues. And as you can probably also imagine, this is a population that doesn't have a lot of great health insurance. So what do you do when you experience a lot of health problems in an emergency situation? You go to the emergency room. It is the most accessible. Ironically, it's also the most expensive form of health care. And what we have found is when you start tallying the random ricochet effect of all of these services in a very disproportionate kind of way that our homeless on the street really are utilizing, that the sheer cost just to keep our homeless on the street bouncing from one network of services to the next, both mainstream and homeless specific, it becomes extraordinarily expensive. In fact, the United States Interagency Council on Homelessness did a study and found that it costs anywhere between $35,000 and $150,000 per person per year just to keep a person on the street, bouncing in and out again of our jail and our emergency room, sleeping under a bridge or on a park bench. But ultimately, after that year has gone by, we've our community dollar has put a lot at stake in terms of helping that individual, and that person really isn't any closer to no longer being homeless than they were at the beginning of that year. So then it really does beg the question, then what does it take to actually end homelessness? We realize that the emergency shelter service model and soup kitchens, which really have been the historic model by which we've addressed this problem, really, frankly, not the solutions in terms of actually getting people out of homelessness. Sure, it really helps someone get from today to tomorrow, and we don't want to understate that, because in many cases that can literally mean the difference between life and death. But I think if we really want to get to a point where we're actually able to end homelessness, well, that's going to require us to take a little bit different approach. And I think what we have found is that if you're just staying in a position of homelessness, you really are existing in survival mode, where almost all of your time is really being dedicated to things like, where's my next meal going to come from? Where am I going to sleep tonight? Where am I going to find the clothing to put on my back? And when you have these immediate needs that are bearing down on you every single moment, you're really, frankly, not in a position to really be able to fundamentally transform your life around mental health, substance abuse, education, employment. Really, it's housing that is enmeshed in case management and support services that allows that to happen. And I think what we have found is that a lot of times we've created this crazy network of services around our homeless, that random ricochet effect that I mentioned earlier. And ultimately, it's again very expensive, but it ultimately doesn't really meet the needs of our population. And then so what do we then really need to do is provide permanent supportive housing, enmeshed in case management support services, which really work to reduce homelessness. And I think if we can really get to that point and really focus on those solutions which actually work, which have been proven time and time again in communities all across the country, then shouldn't we, in the same way that we look at the business models in terms of revenue, in terms of profit, and the ways that we look at revenue streams, and from a corporate standpoint, we're always trying to quantify our success. Then in the same way, that's also what we want to be doing with our homeless population. We want to measure the kinds of results that we're going to get, because if it's worth profit and if it's worth money, then shouldn't we use those same kind of skill sets, use those same kind of tools when it comes to ending homelessness? We realize you cannot do it by the private sector alone, by the business sector alone, by the nonprofit community alone. You can't do it by government or the faith community. It's only through collaborative effort and by individuals. And I will finish with one last statement, and that is, I've been told by people who've been working with the homeless for decades, they said people become homeless less because they run out of money and more because they run out of relationships. And so at that individual human level, that's where we can also make the biggest impact, tying in with what those practices which we know are time-tested, evidence-based, are field-tested in a way that we know we can really transform this issue.